grade 8. So today we're going to finish chapter 1. So we are starting at the top of page 7. So remember that as we read, we want to be recording what we are learning about our characters. So for this first chapter, I'll direct you to stop when we get to those parts of the story that you might want to go add to that document. I sat down again, rubbing my cheek where I'd been slugged the most. Jerry jammed his fist into his pockets. That didn't hurt you too bad, did they? They did. I was smarting and aching, and my chest was sore, and I was so nervous my hands were shaking, and I wanted to start bawling. But you don't just say that to Derry. I'm okay. Soda Pop came loping back. By then I had figured that all the noise I had heard was the gang coming to rescue me. He dropped down beside me, examining my head. You got a little cut up, huh, pony boy? I looked at him blankly. I did? He pulled out a handkerchief, wet the end of it with his tongue, and pressed it gently against the side of my head. You're bleeding, like a stuck pig. I am? Look. He showed me the handkerchief, reddened as if by magic. Did they pull a blade on you? I remembered the voice. Need a haircut, greaser? The blade must have slipped while he was trying to shut me up. Yeah. Soda is handsomer than anyone I know. Not like Derry. Soda's movie star kind of handsome. The kind that makes people stop on the street when he goes by. He's not as tall as Derry, and he's a little slimmer, but he has a finely drawn, sensitive face that somehow manages to be reckless and thoughtful at the same time. He's got dark gold hair that he combs back, long and silky and straight, and in the summer, the sun bleaches it to a shining wheat gold. His eyes are dark brown, lively, dancing, recklessly laughing eyes that could be gentle and sympathetic one moment and blazing with anger the next. He has Dad's eyes, but Soda is one of a kind. He can get drunk in a drag race or dancing without even getting near alcohol. In our neighborhood, it's rare to find a kid who doesn't drink once in a while, but Soda never touches a drop. He doesn't need to. He gets drunk on plain living, and he understands everybody. So in that last section, bottom of page 7, top of page 8, we learn a lot about Soda Pop. So you might want to pause the video, head over to Classroom to the character development slides, and add some information in about about Soda Pop, sorry. Remembering you can paraphrase or you can do direct quotes, but it's a lot of quotes, so pick out the most important things that you think might be important to know about Soda Pop. He looked at me more closely. I looked away hurriedly, because, if you want to know the truth, I was starting to bawl. I knew I was white as I felt, and I was shaking like a leaf. Soda just put his hand on my shoulder. Easy, pony boy, they ain't gonna hurt you no more. I know, I said, but the ground began to blur, and I felt hot tears running down my cheek. I brushed them away impatiently. I'm just a little spooked, that's all. I drew a quivering breath and quit crying. You just don't cry in front of Derry, not unless you're hurt like Johnny had been that day we found him in the vacant lot. Compared to Johnny, I wasn't hurt at all. Soda rubbed my hair. You're an okay kid, Pony. I had to grin at him. Soda can make you grin no matter what. I guess it's because he's always grinning so much himself. You're crazy, Soda. Out of your mind. Derry looked like he'd like to knock our heads together. You're both nuts. Soda merely cocked one eyebrow, a trick he picked up from Two-Bit. It seems to run in the family. Derry stared at him for a second and then cracked a grin. Soda Pop isn't afraid of him like everybody else and enjoys teasing him. I just as soon tease a full-grown grizzly, but for some reason, Derry seems to like being teased by Soda. So, again, page 9 here, right at the top, a little bit of a hint about the relationship between Derry and Soda Pop. Derry likes to be teased by his middle brother. Our gang had chased the Socias to their car and heaved rocks at them. They came running towards us now, 4 lean, hard guys. They were all as tough as nails and looked it. I'd grown up with them, and they accepted me, even though I was younger. That's because I was Derry and Soda's kid brother, and I kept my mouth shut good. Steve Randall was 17, tall and lean, with thick, greasy hair he kept combed in complicated swirls. He was cocky, smart, and Soda's best buddy since grade school. Steve's specialty was cars. He could lift a hubcap quicker and more quietly than anyone in the neighborhood, but he also knew cars upside down and backwards, and he could drive anything on wheels. He and Soda worked at the same gas station, Steve part-time and Soda full-time, and their station got more customers than any other in town. Whether that was because Steve was so good with cars or because Soda attracted girls like honey drew flies, I couldn't tell you. I liked Steve only because he was Soda's best friend. He didn't like me. He thought I was Tag along and a kid. Soda always took me with them when they went places, if they weren't taking girls, and that bugged Steve. It wasn't my fault. Soda always asked me. I didn't ask him. Soda doesn't think I'm a kid. So in that section, we learned a lot about Steve Randall. So again, pausing, heading over to the character document. If Steve is not listed as one of the main characters, at the end of the slides, there are slides for minor characters. You might just fill one in with Steve Randall and write a few things about him. Two-Bit Matthews was the oldest of the gang and the wisecracker of the bunch. He was about 6 feet tall, stocky in build, and very proud of his long, rusty-colored sideburns. He had gray eyes and a wide grin, and he couldn't stop making funny remarks to save his life. You couldn't shut that guy up. He always had to get his 2 bits worth in, hence the name. Even his teachers forgot his real name was Keith, and we hardly remembered he had one. Life was one big joke for 2-Bit. He was famous for shoplifting and his black-handled switchblade, which he couldn't have acquired without his first talent. And he was always smarting off to the cops. He really couldn't help it. Everything he said was so irresistibly funny that he just had to let the police in on it to brighten up their dull lives. That's the way he explained it to me. He liked fights, blondes, and for some unfathomable reason, school. He was still a junior at 18 and a half and never learned anything. So in the States, it goes freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, so he's 18 in grade 11. He went just for kicks. I liked him well enough because he kept us laughing at ourselves as well as other things. He reminded me of Will Rogers. Maybe it was the grin. So again, we are learning a lot about some characters, so you might want to pause and fill in some stuff about 2-Bit Matthews, or Keith. If I had to pick the real character of the gang, it would be Dallas Winston, Dally. I used to like to draw his picture when he was in a dangerous mood, for then I could get his personality down in a few lines. He had an elfish face with high cheekbones and a pointed chin, small, sharp animal teeth, and ears like a lynx. His hair was almost white, it was so blonde, and he didn't like haircuts or hair oil either, so it all fell over his forehead in wisps and kicked out in the back in tufts and curled behind his ears and along the nape of his neck. His eyes were blue, blazing ice cold, with the hatred of the whole world. Dally had spent 3 years on the wild side of New York and had been arrested at the age of 10. He was tougher than the rest of us, tougher, colder, meaner. The shade of difference that separates a greaser from a hood wasn't present in Dally. He was as wild as the boys in the downtown outfits, like Tim Shepard's gang. In New York, Dally blew off steam in gang fights, but here, organized gangs are rarities. There are just small bunches of friends who stick together, and the warfare is between the social classes. A rumble, when it's called, is usually born of a grudge fight, and the opponents just happen to bring their friends along. Oh, there are a few named gangs around, like the River Kings and the Timber Street Tigers, but here in the Southwest there's no gang rivalry. So, Dally, even though he could get in a good fight sometimes, had no specific thing to hate. No rival gangs, only socias. And you can't win against them no matter how hard you try, because they've got all the breaks, and even whipping them isn't going to change that fact. Maybe that's why Dallas was so bitter. He had quite a reputation. They had a file on him down at the police station. He had been arrested, he got drunk, he rode in rodeos, lied, cheated, stole, rolled drunks, jumped small kids. He did everything. I didn't like him, but he was smart and you had to respect him. Johnny Cade was last and least. If you can picture a little dark puppy that had been kicked too many times and is lost in a crowd of strangers, you'll have Johnny. So, this might be a good spot for you to pause and go back and record some of the stuff we learned about Dally. And then we're going to learn a bit more about Johnny Cade. So remember, don't record every single word the author is telling us about these characters, just the key ideas that help us understand who they are. So their physical appearance is important, and some of their main characteristics. He was the youngest next to me, smaller than the rest, with a slight build. He had big black eyes and a dark tan face. His hair was jet black and heavily greased and combed to the side, but it was so long that it fell in shaggy bangs across his forehead. He had a nervous, suspicious look in his eyes, and the beating he got from the socias didn't help matters. He was the gang's pet, everybody's kid brother. His father was always beating him up, and his mother ignored him, except when she was hacked off at something, and then you could hear her yelling at him clear down at our house. I think he hated that worse than getting whipped. He could have run away a million times if we hadn't been there. If it hadn't been for the gang, Johnny would never have known what love and affection was. I wiped my eyes hurriedly. Did you catch him? No. They got away this time, the dirty, Two-Bit went on cheerfully, calling the Socias every name he could think of or make up. The kids okay? I'm okay. I tried to think of something to say. I'm usually pretty quiet around people, even the gang. I changed the subject. I didn't know you were out of the cooler yet, Dally. Cooler being jail. Good behavior. Got off early. Dallas lit a cigarette and handed it to Johnny. Everyone sat down to have a smoke and relax. A smoke always lessens the tension. I had quit trembling and my color was back. The cigarette was calming me down. Two-Bit cocked an eyebrow. Nice looking bruise you got there, kid. I touched my cheek gingerly. Really? Two-Bit nodded sagely. Nice cut, too. Makes you look tough. Tough? T-O-U-G-H and tough, T-U-F-F, are two different words. Tough is the same as rough. Tough means cool, sharp, like a tough-looking Mustang or a tough record. In our neighborhood, both are compliments. Steve flicked his ashes at me. What were you doing walking by your lonesome? Leave it to good old Steve to bring up something like that. I was coming home from the movies. I didn't think. You don't ever think, Derry broke in. Not at home or anywhere where it counts. You must think at school with all those good grades you bring home. You've always got your nose in a book. Do you ever use your head for common sense? No, siree, bub. And if you did have to go by yourself, you should have carried a blade. I just stared at the hole in the toe of my tennis shoe. Me and Derry didn't dig each other. I never could please him. He would have hollered at me for carrying a blade if I had carried one. If I brought home B's, he wanted A's. If I got A's, he wanted to make sure they stayed A's. If I was playing football, I should be studying, and if I was reading, I should be out playing football. He never hollered at Soda Pop, not even when Soda dropped out of school or got a ticket for speeding. He just hollered at me. Soda was glaring at him. Leave my kid brother alone, you hear? This ain't his fault he likes to go to the movies, and it ain't his fault the Socials like to jump us. And if he had been carrying a blade, it would have been a good excuse to cut him to ribbons. Soda always takes up for me. So, again, a good characteristic to write down, right? Soda's always looking after Ponyboy. Derry said impatiently, When I want my kid brother to tell me what to do with my other kid brother, I'll ask you, kid brother. But he laid off me. He always does when Soda Pop tells him to, most of the time. Next time get one of us to go with you, Ponyboy, Two-Bit said. Any of us will. Speaking of movies, Dally yawned, flipping away his cigarette butt. I'm walking over to the nightly double tomorrow night. Anyone want to come and hunt some action? Steve shook his head. Me and Soda are picking up Evie and Sandy for the game. He didn't need to look at me the way he did right then. I wasn't going to ask if I could come. I'd never tell Soda because he really likes Steve a lot, but sometimes I can't stand Steve Randall. I mean it. Sometimes I hate him. Derry sighed, just like I knew he would. Derry never had time to do anything anymore. I'm working tomorrow night. Dally looked at the rest of us. How about y'all? Two-Bit, Johnny Cake, you and Pony want to come? Me and Johnny will come, I said. I knew Johnny wouldn't open his mouth unless he was forced to. Okay, Derry? Yeah, since it ain't a school night. Derry was real good about letting me go places on the weekends. On school nights, I could hardly leave the house. I was planning on getting boozed up tomorrow night, Two-Bit said. If I don't, I'll walk over and find y'all. Steve was looking at Dally's hand. His ring, which he had rolled a drunk senior to get, was back on his finger. You break up with Sylvia again? Yeah, and this time it's for good. That little broad was two-timing me again while I was in jail. I thought of Sylvia and Evie, and Sandy, and Two-Bit's many blondes. They were the only kind of girls that would look at us, I thought. Tough, loud girls who wore too much eye makeup and giggled and swore too much. I liked Soda's girl Sandy just fine, though. Her hair was natural blonde, and her laugh was soft like her blue china eyes. She didn't have a real good home or anything, and she was our kind, Greaser, but she was a real nice girl. So in the minor section part, you might want to write Sandy down. This is the top of page 15. So Sandy is Soda Pop's girlfriend, and here Ponyboy's telling us a little bit about her. Still, lots of times I wondered what other girls were like. The girls who were bright-eyed, and their dresses a decent length, and acted like they'd spit on us if given a chance. Some were afraid of us, remembering Dallas Winston. I didn't blame them, but most looked at us like we were dirt. Gave us the same kind of look that the Socias did when they came by in their Mustang and Corvairs and yelled, "Grease!" at us. I wondered about them, the girls I mean. Did they cry when their boys were arrested like Evie did when Steve got hauled in? Or did they run out on them the way Sylvia did Dallas? But maybe their boys didn't get arrested or beaten up or busted up in rodeos. I was thinking about it while I was doing my homework that night. I had read The Great Expectations for English, and that kid, Pip, he reminded me of us, the way he felt marked lousy because he wasn't a gentleman or anything, and the way the girls kept looking down on him. This happened to me once. One time in biology, I had to dissect a worm, and the razor wouldn't cut, so I used my switchblade. The minute I flicked it out, I forgot what I was doing, or I never would have done it. That girl right beside me gasped and said, "You're right. You are a hood." That didn't make me feel so hot. There were a lot of Socias in that class. I get put in A classes because I'm supposed to be smart, and most of them thought it was pretty funny. I didn't, though. She was a cute girl. She looked real good in yellow. We deserve a lot of trouble, I thought. Dallas deserves everything he gets, and should be worse if you want the truth. And Two-Bit, he doesn't really want or need half the things he swipes from stores. He just thinks it's fun to swipe everything that isn't nailed down. I can understand why Soda Pop and Steve get into drag races and fight so much, though. Both of them have too much energy, too much feeling, and no way to blow it off. "Rub harder, Soda," I heard Derry mumbling. "You're going to put me to sleep." I looked through the door. Soda Pop was giving Derry a back rub. Derry is always pulling muscles. He roofs houses, and he's always trying to carry 2 bundles of roofing up the ladder. I knew Soda would put him to sleep because Soda can put just about anyone he sets his mind to it. Just about put anyone out when he sets his mind to it. He thought Derry worked too hard anyway. I did too. Derry didn't deserve to work like an old man when he was 20. He had been a real popular guy in school. He was captain of the football team, and he had been voted Boy of the Year. But we just didn't have the money for him to go to college, even with the athletic scholarships he won. And now he didn't have time between jobs to even think about college. So he never went anywhere and never did anything anymore except work out at the gym and go skiing with some old friends of his sometimes. So again, might be a good time to pause and go record some things about Dally. I rubbed my cheek where it had turned purple. I had looked in the mirror, and it did make me look tough. But Derry had made me put a band-aid on the cut. I remembered how awful Johnny had looked when he got beaten up. I had just as much right to use the streets as the Socias did, and Johnny never hurt them. Why did the Socias hate us so much? We left them alone. I nearly went to sleep over my homework trying to figure it out. Soda Pop, who had jumped into bed by this time, yelled sleepily for me to turn off the light and get to bed. When I finished the chapter I was on, I did. Lying beside Soda, staring at the wall, I kept remembering the faces of the Socias as they surrounded me. That blue Madras shirt the blonde was wearing, and I could still hear a thick voice. "Need a haircut, greaser?" I shivered. "You cold, pony boy?" "A little," I lied. Soda threw one arm across my neck. He mumbled something drowsily. "Listen, kiddo, when Derry hollers at you, he don't mean nothing. He's just got more worries than somebody his age ought to. Don't take him serious, you dig, pony. Don't let him bug you. He's really proud of you because you're so brainy. It's just because you're the baby. I mean, he loves you a lot, savvy?" "Sure," I said, trying for Soda's sake to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "Soda?" "Yeah?" "How come you dropped out?" I never have gotten over that. I could hardly stand it when he left school. "'Cause I'm dumb. The only thing I was passing anyway were auto mechanics and gym." "You're not dumb." "Yeah, I am. Shut up and I'll tell you something. Don't tell Derry, though, okay?" "Okay. I think I'm gonna marry Sandy after she gets out of school and I get a better job and everything. I might wait till you get out of school, though, so I can still help Derry out with bills and stuff." "Tough enough. Wait till I get out, though, so you can keep Derry off my back." "Don't be like that, kid. I told you that he don't mean half of what he says." "You in love with Sandy? What's it like?" He sighed happily. "It's real nice." In a moment his breathing was light and regular. I turned my head and looked at him. And in the moonlight he looked like some Greek god coming to earth. I wondered how he could stand being so handsome. Then I sighed. I didn't quite get what he meant about Derry. Derry thought I was just another mouth to feed and somebody to holler at. Derry? Love me? I thought of those hard, pale eyes. Soda was wrong for once, I thought. Derry doesn't love anyone or anything, except for maybe Soda. I didn't hardly think of him as being human. I don't care, I lied to myself. I don't care about him either. Soda's enough, and I have him until I get out of school. I don't care about Derry, but I am still lying and I knew it. I lied to myself all the time, but I never believed me. So that is the end of page 18 and the end of chapter 1. So again, you're going to want to go back through the chapter and record all those important things we learned about the characters. This chapter has probably the most details about all of the characters that we're going to learn, like explicitly written out. There's a lot of direct characterization that happens in this chapter. After this, it's going to be a little more indirect, and it's going to require a little more thought and picking out. So take advantage of these specific details because they are really going to help you later.